and the Vice Chancellor of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, Mother University, Very Reverend Professor Mbugwa, Stephen Mbugwa, present with us. His Excellency Bishop Rodrigo Meia, following us online and will be joining us in the coming days. To the Deputy Principals of Hekima University College, the Reverend Father Emmanuel Foro, who is outgoing, and Reverend Sister Dr. Jacinta Opondo, incoming principal, and Reverend Father Francis Anyanzu, the Reverend Dr. Gresaura, Superior of the Jesuit Community at the Hekima University College, esteemed professors, invited guests, faculty and colleagues, to those present here and online, and all protocols observed, good evening. It is an honor and a privilege to give you these welcoming remarks as the servant of Hekima University College. I have structured my remarks around 5 points. The journey of the interior, akin to our way of life as Jesuits. The women believer, the presentation of participants, and a word about HUC Hekima University College and words of gratitude. There is a French proverb that says, La flamme qui perdure est celle qui s'allume le plus de l'intérieur. The flame that lasts the longest is the one that lights from within. The journey of the interior. My dear friends, we gather here. If Hekima has lasted for the last 40 years of its existence, it's because our predecessors, we stand on their shoulders and remember them, and with the help of God, they have endeavored to offer deep spiritual, intellectual, human, or better, integral formation. We would like to carry out, to continue this flame and to build on what they have done. So we honor them. This conference certainly is a testimony of the work of formation that many have done here at Hekima University College, forming sons and daughters of God. What distinguishes a theologian from any other academician or professional, if you like, is that a Christian, to narrow it down, a Christian theologian is not like any other academician, at least in my view. A genuine Christian theologian is first and foremost a disciple who gets to know Jesus Christ from his personal encounter. This has precedence over any theological knowledge and is noted by Eliseo Tagambwa in our recent book, Reinventing Theology in Post-Genocide Rwanda. As in the gospel narrative of the young rich man in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verses 18 to 20, to be authentically a true disciple, one must give up everything for Christ and freely follow him. That is why before being a profession, theology is first of all a vocation. It is first and foremost about a calling to be with Christ rather than an erudite discourse about God. And I have nothing against being an erudite, but it's first of all that encounter, a calling to be with Christ, and that guides our acts of judgment and our criteria of judgment. To quote Bishop Rodrigo in his recent book, Evangelization of Cultures. A theologian himself or herself must be a person shaped by the encounter, the values, and the style of life of his master. Therefore, a person dedicated to Christ's project of universal salvation and belonging to the kingdom of God, which excludes no one. Without that, he or she can only speculate, but never be adept to the task. That is why, as Dermot rightly asserts, The mystery of God is not some kind of theorem to be proved. It is rather an experience to be lived. We gather, therefore, to go beyond theorems, but to be nourished by the experiences of encounter of so many women present here, and to be transformed by God who chose to come to us through a woman, the Virgin Mary. We gather on the eve of the International Women's Day, the 8th of March, to celebrate our mothers, our sisters, women of our lives, those living and those who have gone. The American theologian Elizabeth Johnson argues that remembering the dead honors the mystery of divine grace that pervades the lives of people living today, the grace that brings people to fulfillment in God that is already operative now and here. A community that remembers begins to act with ethical responsibility for all creatures who share in the common of the Holy God, the community of the holy. Indeed, the same Elizabeth Johnson could not have been more right. As we gather on the eve of the International Day of Women, we remember them. Remembering the great crowd of female friends of God and prophets, the title of her book, taken of course from scripture, opens up the possibility for the future. Their lives bespeak an unfinished agenda that is now in our hands. Their testimony is a challenge to action. Their companionship points the way.
Right.
So as we come today in a special way, and on the eve of the International Women's Day, please help me as we pause and remember so many brave women, and often those who got forgotten. We give them a moment of remembrance in silence. We remember those great crowds. And on this day, one of our students lost his great-grandmother. Deacon Solani lost his great-grandmother, the Anzenza Teresa, in Brazzaville, Congo. We remember her. She has played a role in his vocation. If we want the flame to last longer, to go back to our theme, let us seek familiarity with God, as Eliseo Tagangwa reminds us. And this takes us beyond the temptation of being co-opted by any ideologies. If we do not have the experience of familiarity with God, we will give nothing. How do we cultivate the familiarity with God? It is that journey of the interior. Speaking to the Jesuits in Syria on the 22nd of March, 2011, the late Superior General of the Society of Jesus, Father Adolfo Nicholas, had this to say, and it may apply to this to us beyond just Jesuits. The first Jesuits, I quote, this is very clear, they had a lot of passion. This is why we have people like Francis Xavier, Matteo Ricci, Roberto De Nobili, the reduction of Paraguay. They were Jesuits with incredible passion, and they did wonders without being geniuses. They had a passion, and they didn't have to ask for sabbatical years at the time, because passion gives energy. Passion is a source of energy. And for Jesuits today, I'm always surprised of the fatigue that I see. I'm continuing. Where does this come from? We don't have enough interior energy. End of God. Passion is a source of energy. Let us ask God in this conference to give us that passion. Let us consult others and be inspired. On the day of my doctoral defense, soon after I was proclaimed doctor, Professor M. Sean Copeland held me in her hands and she said, now, Dr. Winez, I know you will go back to Africa. America is not the place. As you go, and I quote, remember the formation of women. Professor Copeland is here with us. Please let me ask her to stand and we thank her. It was the same with Professor Lisa Cahill, who also had been on my doctoral comprehensive committee and also accompanied me when I was invited to speak in New York at the United Nations. And she gave me a symbol that I will never forget, a symbol or a cross with a lot of shades around it, but also with the sign of the Spirit that go and be wise. Professor Lisa Cahill is also here. These women have played a major part in my life and inspired this conference. Professor Cahill, please stand. I may not have another occasion to show it, so this was what Cahill gave me. This was in 2019. You can see the dove, that be wise. And then Professor Copeland, this is when I had just been named the doctor, and here she says, remember the formation of women. Obviously, when you do something like this, you can easily cause the jealousy. But I hope this is a good one. Passion has driven these women, and they have formed many of us, from Dr. Elias Opondo, Dr. Elizeu Tagangwa, Dr. Jean-Luc Enyege, Father Norbert. All those who have gone through Boston College have passed through these women. And so we celebrate you as well. And you can see that women deliver. My second point. Women's work challenge long-held gender stereotypes, sexism, discrimination, and favoritism, which often plays the role in appointment decisions. And I am so pleased that Hekima, for the first time, has now in high position, or rather in greater responsibility and burden, we have a woman named in bigger universities, she will be a provost. This is the sister Dr. Jacinta Opondo. So we are moving ahead. May she stand and we celebrate her. So our appointment could not have come at a better time than this when you are all gathering. The Spirit is at work. In my experience, women, many often say that my experience, I was given the jobs no one else wanted. These were seen as dead ends geared to failure. Someone had to do them, so why not choose somebody expendable? A woman, of course. A woman is likely to be chosen when all other male options have failed. That should stop. And so, my dear friends, as we gather here, we celebrate these women who have delivered. Women often have different priorities than those of men. They have more concerns about issues related to violence in general and gender-based violence in particular. Women have faced discrimination, so they want to put a stop to it. And we have seen that in the interventions at the Synod on Synodality. In Rwanda, women held positions, key positions, established to deal with the challenges of reconciliation in the aftermath of the genocide against the Tutsi. They worked in the Unity and Reconciliation Commission and the Gacaca process, the traditional courts that were held to help heal the nation. Women comprised more than 30% of some of the 160,000 Gacaca judges countrywide and were considered good and honest witnesses in comparison to their male counterparts. Women played a major role as community mediators, abunzi, and contributed to resolving conflicts using traditional Rwandan practices of conflict resolution. Today, with their male their male counterparts, they have helped reduce the number of people languishing in poorly serviced prisons of Rwanda. Women have helped healing the memories of Rwanda. The journey still continues. Women in Rwanda comprise of 64% of the Rwanda's parliament. This is not just about statistics. Women deliver. They have helped to reduce, to change the laws where women could not inherit, young girls could not inherit the land. If you make a mistake as a man to beat a wife in Rwanda, you go to jail for 10 years. That would not have happened without the presence of women. With these words in mind, I'm pleased to invite you to Hekima University College for this international conference on African women theologians and synodality. Our goal, together with the steering committee, our goal is to amplify the voice of African women in theological discourse and to prompt the well-deserved, respectful listening of African women theologians and peace builders. By the church, to be respected by the church and society. We regret that women theologian voices often go unheard. As Hekima University College celebrates 40 years of its existence, we join the intellectual community alongside our ecclesial leaders to celebrate women theologians who continue to serve the church even when they go unheard. We continue to ask, who is missing at the table? We hope this international conference will be our synodal testimony that Hekima University College wants to be comprehensive. And with those words, I would like now to present the participants who have come to us from different parts of the world and many parts of Africa. Allow me to present our invited participants to this international conference. They will present papers in systematic theology and synodality, canon law and synodality, ecclesiology and synodality, the Bible and synodality, peace building and synodality, pastoral theology and synodality, you name it. You have this in your beautiful laid out manual for the conference. Make a point to listen to each one of them. Give each person the attention they deserve. Be engaged. Give people some benefit of that. Don't criticize before you have listened. And I know this may take some time, but you have come from far. I will just say this not in any order of priority, as I received it from the sisters who the committee that organized. We have Sister Alice Sia, who has joined us. Is she around? Then we have Dr. Gift Dawson. Is she around? We have Dr. Nora Nontera. Welcome from Ghana. We have Sister Agnes Archer from Nigeria, Lagos. We have Dr. Audrey Mwale from Lusaka, Zambia. Okay. We have Sister John Berry from Yaoundé, Cameroon. We have Sister Angela Mangiang from Cameroon. We have Sister Sabina Usure Ngweme from Cameroon. We have Sister Karin Tiara from Cameroon. We have Sister Cynthia Emeka from Nigeria. We have Sister Mary Jerome Obiora from Enugu State, Nigeria. If I massacre your name, please forgive me. We have Dr. Mercy from Bahimi from Harare, present with us. Then we have Sister Stella Maris Mutindi from Kenya. Sister Anastasia Nkansa. We have Sister Yvonne Akundo. We have Betty To from Kenya. We have Sister Henriette Ann. We have Sister Jane Kairu. We have Sister Lucia Ndinda. And then among our keynote speakers, we have Sister Dr. Jose Ngarura from Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have Professor Teresa Okure, Sister Professor Teresa Okure from Lagos, Nigeria. We have Professor Mary Getui from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, Kenya. We have following us, Bishop Rodrigo is been unwell, but he's following us online. Then we will listen to online to Dr. Roberto, online from Santa Clara University. We will have Dr. Lokadi Rushombo, teaches at Santa Clara University. She's originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. She's online, we welcome her. We have among our keynote speakers, we have Professor Lisa Cahill. And our keynote speakers, we have Professor M. Sean Copeland. Our specially invited guest, we have our very own Vice Chancellor, the Reverend Professor Stephen Mbugwa of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. Father, I usually call him His Eminence. We have Mrs. Margaret Muhoro. If I mess up, she's the one who fires me. So she's the chair of the council. Welcome. We have Sister Brigida Samba Mwasi from Akweka. Then Christine Odewes from Porticus. And then we have Sister Priscilla Nimioke and Sister Josephine Kangondo. And we will be graced by the presence of the Archbishop of Nairobi in the final day. And then we have a wonderful visitor from the Institute of Advanced Catholic Studies in the United States of America, in California. And this is Dr. Becky King Selin. We welcome you. Thank you very much. So those are our guests who have come to us. As you can see, I think it makes sense that we at least know who is who and who has come, even though it takes a few minutes. So allow me. Remember the goal of this conference. It has a synodality component. And so as I invite you, the purpose of the synod is not to produce more documents. Rather, it is intended to inspire people to dream about the church we are called to be, to make people's hopes flourish, to stimulate trust, to bind up wounds, to weave new and deeper relationships, to learn from one another, to build bridges, to enlighten minds, to warm hearts, to restore strength to our hands for our common mission. You can imagine the value of each verb in this quotation. It's a powerful quotation that ends the instrumentum laboris of the synod of synodality. So may we be synodal as we listen to one another. And now, finally, words of gratitude. I would like to thank the chair of the Board of Trustees, the Reverend Father Minaku, who has been behind us, asking how this is going, and he is also delivering some words of remarks. I would like to thank the Rector of the Jesuit community for his prayer and support. Immense gratitude to the Ignatius Scholarship that provided funds for this conference, and to Jason Zenk, who has been a great supporter of Hekima University College. Special gratitude to the organizing team. Our work together has revealed to me what it means to be a leader and to organize teams. A team where members trust each other and they follow the following characteristics. And when you have good teams, you come to the conference, you are not worried. So what we have come to discover is really that we admitted our own mistakes and weaknesses. We asked for help. We took risk in offering feedback and assistance. We appreciated and tapped into each other's skills and experience. We focused on time and energy on important issues, not on petty issues. We offered and accepted our apologies without hesitation. We look forward to this meeting with great enthusiasm. Please join me, thank the steering committee of this. May I invite them to stand so that we thank them. The steering committee, please stand. They have worked night and day and tirelessly. To this team, you add Norbert Rituan, and then you have Macharia, Dr. Macharia as well, and myself. What we have come to discover is, in the Swahili words, is that umoja ni nguvu. Umoja ni nguvu. It has been a teamwork, and that's our style of leadership. An African proverb knows that if the roots are deep, we have no reason to fear the winds. HUC desires to deepen the church's intellectual roots and to prevent challenging winds ahead. To do that, women have to be an integral part, and this has been too late. We are pleased to announce our Hekima review. Each of you has received a copy in your bag. It is a peer-reviewed journal. Please publish in it. It's an excellent contribution, and the director of the review is here. If I may ask him to stand so that you can be in touch with him after this conference, during this conference, to contribute. Dr. Eyowa is the director of the review and has been doing an excellent job. Thank you very much. As I conclude, let me encourage many scholars gathered here to keep the culture of excellence, the culture of reading. We live in a continent of Africa where sometimes if you want to steal from people, you write. Let me urge superiors among you to send sisters for further studies and without any complexity. Because sometimes the challenge is if I send sisters to study, they will come and challenge me. I say that after a lot of experience, after listening to many sisters. Let me ask also many of you to realize that doing theology should now be synodal. At Hekima University College, we have an online program in theology for sisters, and currently we have more than 140 sisters following the program. Tell your sisters to register for it. The next intake will be in August, so there is still time. I give you one example as I conclude. I went for evaluation of the program in Zimbabwe, and I met one sister she's in her 60s, and she said, Father, I have finished now this program, and I look back and I regret how much poison I've given in the past. I wish I had been informed before. Then I said, it is not too late. This has happened. Tell other sisters to join. And to those of you who have the means, part of my job is marketing, and I have no qualms looking for money. To those of you who have the means, forming one woman in theology at Hekima for 3 years, and we have excellent formation. It only cost 15,000, everything included, for 3 years. So I will certainly ask the deputy principal for finance to look for you. At least a contribution to 1 or 2. So this is $15,000 for $15,000 for 3 years. When I was in America at Boston College, my 1 year was $72,000 for 1 year. And I don't think Boston College does better than Hekima. So my dear friends, and I say that really with a lot of humility, because even though we celebrate decades of formation, if I give you statistics of women who have passed through Hekima, they are still very few. My secretary gave me statistics. In 1999, from what I could gather, there was no woman. We had 23 male. 2000, no woman. 2001, no woman. 2002, 2 women. If I go up to 2023, only 6 women graduated. In total, we have had, this is in theology, we have had only 107 women who have graduated from Hekima against 1,000 from 2000. You can see that the proportion are just not just. So statistics certainly speak for themselves. They have their own limitations, of course. A word about Hekima. Hekima started in 1984 as primarily a center for formation for young Jesuits on their way to ordination. And our legacy is to nurture people to become faithful servants and global citizens in the society of Jesus. But we have now been joined by several religious congregations. Right now we count 15 who have joined. So from one congregation to 15 in 40 years. From a modest beginning in 1984, our Jesuit School of Theology remains open to other congregations to seek excellent formation for their men and women. As a result, 15 religious congregations participate in the mission of Hekima. HUC offers ecclesiastical degrees awarded by the Faculty of Theology of the Jesuits in Africa and Madagascar in the name of the Holy See. And responding to the African continent's needs for peace and reflecting on the ever-escalating wars and conflicts, in 2004, HUC opened its second school, the Hekima Institute of Peace Studies and International Relations. Those who know me, I like to celebrate others. At the very inception of this very idea, we had Dr. Opondo. At the time, he was not yet a doctor. Please, let me ask him to stand, and others who were with him, because they are the originators of the idea. We have now 2 faculties, the Faculty of Theology and the Faculty of Peace Studies and International Relations. Hekima has also launched the new centers of excellence, the Jesuit Historical Institute in Africa, which we have on the 3rd floor, an excellent center. Please visit it. Dr. Jean-Luc Enyeke, not sure if he's around. Great. So please, don't allow them to go before they have seen the center.
Good morning.
Exactly. And then we have another excellent center for research, training, and publications run by Dr. Opongo. So he wears many hats. And then we also have a center for safeguarding in Africa for the care of the vulnerable adults and children. And it's housed here. And we have just started another excellent center on interfaith dialogue. For us to become Christians today, you can't do without dialogue. It's run by Reverend Father Norbert Tuang, who comes to us from Harvard. Norbert, please stand so that these women come to know you. So as I conclude, this part of this celebration of 40 years has had several events, but this one is unique. A number of them happened online. This one, the majority of it, is in person. We had an excellent one, the Pioneers, led by Dr. Jean-Luc Enyeke. It was a wonderful one, but it was all online. But we managed to get you here. So please help me pray for those who sponsored us and give them a round of applause. The key activity left for the celebration of 40 years now is the creation of a chair in African studies, and we are moving in good strides. We will be launching it at the end of the academic year. I would like to thank you very much, and I conclude my remarks with these beautiful words of prayer for women through all the ages. Spirit of renewal, God of many names, and one transforming and abundant love, we turn this month as we commemorate women, celebrate women, to reflect on the stories the heritage, and the struggles of the women through all the ages. We seek to learn from all those voices that have been left unheard. May we pause before the silences of the ages, find who has been left out, and ask ourselves that it is not possible to be content on the table when some people are not present at the table. And craft new ways of inclusion for every week and for every month. May this spiritual practice bring out the voices of those struggling, all those left apart. May we let go of our assumptions and cold comforts of what is normal to live by, unless it be a standard of the gospel. Mother of possibility. In the finding, may we come to know ourselves changed, renewed where we are dry, hopeful where we are lost, and open where we are shut. Amen. I welcome you all, and with these words, I would like to really thank you very much and welcome you to the Human University College. May God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Ubineza, for that heartfelt welcoming remarks. We shall be having 3 opening remarks. The first would be from Very Reverend Jose Minaku, President of the Jesuit Conference of Africa and Madagascar, and Chairman of the Human University College Board of Trustees. This presentation will be made by Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Foro, Vice Principal Academics of Ekima University College.
As said, I will lend my voice to the President Jacob. Adresse à l'occasion de la African Women Theologian Conference, Nairobi, 7th to 10th March 2024. Révérendes sœurs et révérends pères, chers membres du corps académique, distingués invités, chers frères et sœurs, c'est avec un grand plaisir que je vous accueille à cette première édition de la African Women Theologians Conference. Ce jour marque le commencement d'une rencontre de grande facture durant laquelle la voix de la femme se fera entendre de façon claire et elle ouvrira des perspectives nouvelles de la pensée théologique. En contemplant le feuillet qui présente cette conférence, je suis honoré, impressionné et émerveillé par la qualité des interventions et des intervenants. Je vous remercie donc d'avoir répondu positivement à l'invitation de l'Ekima University College pour honorer de votre présence et votre participation ces assises dont Ekima University College est si fier à cause de leur nature particulière. En composant ce mot d'ouverture, j'ai commencé par me demander en quoi organiser une rencontre des théologiennes africaines est un fait événementiel. Je dirais d'emblée qu'il n'y a rien d'extraordinaire car le débat de la particularisation de la femme est d'une époque révolue. Il suffit de parcourir la riche contribution des théologiennes dans l'histoire de la pensée. En effet, que ce soit dans la société ou dans l'arène académique, la femme a réussi à reconquérir la place qui lui était arrachée par une société unilatéralement et injustement machistes. Que ce soit dans la vie sociale, la vie économique ou professionnelle, le rôle grandissant de la femme est de plus en plus prépondérant. Cela ne fait l'ombre d'aucun doute. Il y a énormément de publications à ce sujet. Cependant, ce serait un déni fâcheux de ne pas reconnaître que l'organisation de la société en général a toujours littéralement coupé l'échine de la femme. Ce serait du cynisme que de ne pas reconnaître que notre société africaine est moulue par une mentalité majoritairement patriarcale et masculinisée qui marginalise la femme en général. Cela va sans dire qu'il y a des retards à rattraper dans la course de la libération intégrale de la femme. Il y a des hiatus à combler dans le domaine des égalités des droits. Tout un processus de réconciliation de la société avec la femme s'étale au-devant de nous. Il faut du courage et de l'audace pour s'engager sur ce chemin. Aujourd'hui, Hekima University College nous en offre l'opportunité. Toutes mes félicitations au président de Hekima University College, le père Marcel Ouineza, et à l'équipe organisatrice de ce colloque. Ainsi, une rencontre comme celle, au lieu d'être considérée comme un fait d'exception, devrait devenir une opportunité ouverte qui permettra de faire entendre la voix de la femme que la tradition d'aujourd'hui semble étouffer. Cette conférence est une opportunité pour les théologiens et les théologiennes de partager les fruits de leurs recherches, d'entamer une conversation qui ne peut qu'aboutir à l'avancement du savoir dans un monde de plus en plus complexe. Personnellement, j'entrevois une double opportunité qui s'offre à nous. D'une part, la voix de la femme peut aider l'Église à retrouver son vrai visage. D'autre part, ce colloque ouvre la voie à une systématisation de la pensée en vue de créer progressivement une tradition solide. Le thème choisi tourne autour de la vie ecclésiale sur le chemin de la synodalité. Que pouvons-nous espérer des théologiennes africaines dans la construction d'une nouvelle Église synodale? Je pense que dans ces assises, la voix de la femme peut aider à vivre en vérité l'Église que nous professons dans l'Église catholique. Une sainte, catholique et apostolique. En effet, la voix de la femme donnera une tonalité particulière à l'unité de l'Église qui est riche de sa diversité et qui se nourrit d'une sève vitale dont la femme est la première protectrice. La voix de la femme renforcera la sainteté de l'Église qui est faite certes de nos faiblesses, mais surtout du témoignage de tant de saintes femmes qui enrichissent le florilège des saints de l'Église. La voix de la femme exprimera de façon claire la catholicité de l'Église, c'est-à-dire son caractère universel et par conséquent l'expression du respect du rôle de la femme en son sein. Observez combien les théologiennes africaines vont au-delà des dénominations religieuses. Le terme catholique n'est pas restrictif. Il est plutôt ouvert et embrassant. La voix de la femme exprime cela au mieux. Enfin, la voix de la femme mettra davantage en lumière l'apostolicité de l'Église. L'élévation de Marie-Madeleine au rang d'apôtre est le signe éloquent de la restauration inéluctable d'une histoire tronquée par la puissance masculine. La femme retrouve patiemment sa place dans la hiérarchie de l'Église. La deuxième opportunité que je décèle est l'exigence de la systématisation de la pensée. Dans son excellent ouvrage intitulé African Women's Theologies, Spirituality and Healing, la théologienne Mercy Amba Udoyoye commence par clarifier son domaine catégorial. Dans son introduction, elle dilate la notion de théologienne jusqu'à intégrer la théologie véhiculée par la tradition orale. Elle dit, by theologians, I do not limit myself to those who write and label themselves as such. I have as sources those whose oral theology is embedded in their prayers, the songs they compose and sing, and the artifacts they create, name, and dedicate. L'auteur parle en fait des sources inspiratrices de la pensée théologique, une sorte de panthéologie. Mais il est important de faire une distinction entre ces sources théologiques et le déploiement d'une pensée théologique systématisée. En effet, l'histoire de la théologie africaine nous enseigne justement que ces riches intuitions initiales n'ont pas profité d'une systématisation de la pensée. Les pionniers ont ainsi disparu avec leur passé original. Par exemple, où sont les productions sur l'ecclésiologie de la théologie de l'inculturation, sur la christologie, sur la théologie sacramentelle? Je vous invite donc à inscrire vos échanges dans un processus de systématisation qui commencera, je l'espère, par la production des actes de ce colloque. Aujourd'hui, la femme n'a donc rien à démontrer. Elle n'a rien à prouver. Sa voix aujourd'hui est une monstration d'une évidence. L'on ne peut plus compter sans elle. Comme le dit si bien un proverbe de chez nous, pour que l'oiseau puisse voler, il lui faut 2 ailes. En langue africaine, ces 2 ailes sont désignées par le tandem mâle et femelle. Au moment où Ekima University College s'envole, fier de ses 40 années, qu'il n'oubliera jamais cette métaphore de l'oiseau volant avec ses 2 ailes. Je suis rempli d'espoir que les échanges apporteront une lumière supplémentaire sur les questions actuelles, sur la place de la femme en vue de l'amélioration de la qualité de vie dans nos sociétés. Je vous souhaite un colloque marqué par l'esprit d'inclusivité, par des échanges respectueux et constructifs pour la construction d'une Église véritablement synodale. Je vous souhaite enfin et anticipativement une fructueuse journée de la femme. Père José Minakou, SJ, président JICA.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Furrow, for that presentation. We shall now invite Reverend Dr. Stephen Iyowa to present the summary of that presentation.
And I'll give a short summary in English. Today marks the beginning of a high-profile meeting during which the voice of women will be clearly heard. And we open up new perspectives in theological imagination. This is due to the quality of the interventions and speakers planned for the coming days. While a conference on African women theologians may not appear extraordinary to some, it remains indubitably that women have contributed significantly to shaping the history of thought. Whether in society or academia, women have succeeded in reconquering their rightful place in society. Although social structures, especially the African society, shaped by a predominantly patriarchal and masculine mentality, repeatedly marginalizes women, a conference of this sort reminds the society of the gaps to fill in the area of equal rights. A genuine reconciliatory process between society and women lies between and before us. Ekima University College offers the opportunity to bridge these gaps. In fact, this conference presents a double opportunity. First, women's voices can help the church find its true face and embrace a professed synodal identity, which is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. This way, the voices of women give a particular tone to the unity of the church, rich in its diversity. They strengthen the holiness of the church through testimonies of so many holy women. These voices also express the Catholicity of the church, which is not restrictive by nature, but open and embracing. And finally, women's voices highlight the apostolicity of the church, in that the elevation of Mary Magdalene to the rank of an apostle becomes an eloquent sign of the inevitable restoration of our history, truncated by masculine power. This remarkable sign dares to place women in the hierarchy of the church. Second, the conference gives room for the systematization of thought. This process, according to Mary Amber Oduyoye, in her work, African Women's Theologies, Spirituality and Healing, is not limited to those who write and label themselves as theologians, but rather include those whose, and I quote, oral theology is embedded in their prayers, the songs they compose and sing, and the artifacts they create, name, and dedicate. End of quote. This inclusivist approach is important for the history of African theology because its rich initial intuitions did not benefit from a systematization of thought. As such, pioneer theologians, especially women, disappeared with their original garments. This conference must value the process of systematization of thought. As an African proverb says, for a bird to fly, it needs two wings. These two wings are designated by the tandem male and female in the African setting. Through this conference, Ekima University College flies, proud of its 40 years of existence, without forgetting the flying bird with wings metaphor. May this conference be marked by the spirit of inclusiveness and respectful exchanges for the construction of a truly synodal church. And finally, in appreciation and in anticipation of tomorrow, I wish all women a happy and fruitful Women's Day. Father Jose Minago, SJ, Jacob President.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Eyowa, for that summary. And our bigger thanks goes to the Decan President for the presentation. The second opening remarks will be given by Mrs. Margaret Muhoro Muiruri, the chairperson of Hekima University College Governing Council.
The chairman of the board of trustees, invited guests, keynote speakers, participants, HEC management, faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, a very Kenyan thing again. Good evening. For our guests from far and wide, karibuni Kenya. Kenya hakuna matata. HEC hakuna matata. I hope you have had an opportunity to enjoy our African tea, our Kenyan tea. It is something to taste. So don't leave before you taste our Kenyan tea. I'm really delighted to be here and to be among many women and sisters and a few men. This takes me back into many years, and I'll tell you where. The theme again also made me reflect on where or what is the position of a woman in church, in society, at home, in the corporate space where I am. And more often than not, it is something that, you know, we have had to fight for in quotes. And sometimes you ask, is it really a fight? The theme, making the voice of an African woman louder in theological discourses, already tells me that there is a voice. We are only making it louder. So the question is, how do we make it louder? How do you want to be heard? And how do you want to make this voice be heard and be distinguished from noise? So that you're not accused of being noisemakers. It's really, you know, a good thing and a greater thing when we bring women from different places together to discuss one common agenda. I know it must have taken the organizing team a great deal of thought, time, resources to do this, and we really do appreciate. So from the board, from the council of the university, we are grateful to the team that has put this together. Dr. Marcel, we can never thank you enough for your leadership. And back to this voice that you want heard and distinguished from any noise. We are then talking about reflecting towards inclusivity, diversity, and recognition of what has been done before, thought of what will be done today, and even a deeper thought because of what needs to be done to prepare for the future. Therefore, a holistic view, a holistic approach to this dialogue means that at the end of the day, we'll have an African context that understands the role of women, theologians, in not only Africa, but on the global space, because that is where we play. We cannot just afford to think about Africa. We have to think about the global space. When I thought about this conference, what came to mind is what Father Marcel started us off on, calling women to the table. And as we call women to the table, this phrase is often used to emphasize on the importance of including women in the decision-making processes. But as women, we'll only be able to take our chair or our spot on the table if we are prepared. So that when we take that position, we don't just sit. And when we speak sense. When we act, we'll act, you know, accordingly. That way, our space and our seats on that table will not only be respected, but it will be appreciated. As we do this and call for this inclusivity, we are called to do this with gentleness and respect. Whenever there is gentleness and respect, then you get the attention so that what you're saying is heard, and probably you solve the puzzle that is at the table and the meeting or the discussion is able to go on. So we are called to take our position at the table. Being prepared skill-wise is one thing. Being prepared mentally is also one thing. Being prepared physically is also important as we seek to take our position at the table, where discussions are being held, where important decisions are being made. The second thing that came to my mind is that out of this conference, then we'll probably have thought of how to create safe spaces where women can speak, where women can be guided, and where women can be able to express their ideas without fear of discrimination. Inclusivity and diversity, again, they mean bringing others into the room, the men. We cannot discuss inclusivity when we leave the men out, even though we are women, the youth, the children. When the discussion is complete, then we are creating a safe space that will allow our women and the society to move on, and will simply be lifting one another as we rise. If we rise and we are not lifting someone, then we will create a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, so something will collapse. We don't want to collapse, so we will rise as we lift others. We will lift others through mentorship as we mentor those who are below us and those who are looking up on us as we grow or as we go up the ladder. Benjamin Franklin put it very well. Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me, I will learn. So again, we are being called to involve other women, other men, other youth, our children, as we rise, so that we can create an intergenerational path where the discourse or where the role of women in our society remains clear and remains at the top of our minds. The last aspect that I want to talk about and take a very short time is self-care. As women, we are very busy. We take care of everybody apart from ourselves. And it is in our nature to fix everything, and then we imagine we will fix ourselves last. At least now, we know this path does not work very well. As part of the discussions that you'll hopefully be able to have in this conference, and as we juggle multiple roles and responsibilities, as women, let us remember to take care of ourselves. That self-care will become part of our lifestyles, and we will create personal journeys that will tailor-make to take care to suit our individual needs and preferences. Where we fail to take care of ourselves, the natural thing that happens is that we pass the stress to the next person. So, ladies, let us remember to take care of ourselves. When we lay the table for everybody to take dinner, let our plate be on the table. Let us not rush to the kitchen to check whether the tea is boiling. Let's sit and enjoy the meal as well. When I look at the people present in this room, I'm reminded of a young girl many years ago who went to a boarding school only to find other 800 small little girls in a blue dress and a blue sweater. white socks, black shoes. Standard uniform in Kenya. If you have never been in a boarding school, then you don't know what it is. This girl was from a local village school, and being away from home was just a nightmare. It is safer to be around mom, dad, family, and do the things that you're used to. And for 4 years in a primary boarding school, then proceeding to another 4 years in a boarding secondary school, my interaction, this happens to be the girl. My interaction was with sisters, fathers, and there was something different. My siblings, we are 6 girls and 1 boy. All the girls went to the same primary school. And this is how powerful we are. We all write the same way. Our handwriting is the same. Why? Because Sister Nora, in class 5, her only subject was handwriting. So the first time I wrote on my exercise book and Sister Nora went around marking your handwriting, she wrote on my book, "Stop writing like a spider." Why? Because my handwriting is a village, like I had just come from a village, sure. But her nurturing nature taught me how to write. Sister Nora made sure that I grew up as an independent girl. That's fine, I could take care of myself, I could make my bed, I knew where my shoes were, I knew where my sweater was. I could basically put my box together. And I was young. Today I look back and wonder, surely, how did she manage 800 small little girls whose mothers were away and they had left that responsibility to her? So sisters, you are influential, you form lives, you form habits, you influence what people become as you interact with them. Today, I am very sure of one thing, that if I walk into any ministry in this country, I'll find a girl from Mount St. Mary's Girls' Mall. I am very sure. I am very sure that more often than not, I'll find a girl from Marymount Girls in a government office, in a private entity. We look alike, we behave the same way, we were taught the same. Somebody chose to raise us, and our mothers and fathers did something else. Maybe has told you that you did a good job. Maybe the voice has not been loud enough. But today I want to assure you that as much as the voice may not be loud enough, you have done a good job. And probably it is on our ends that we should speak more of the women and men who took care of us, who formed us and taught us the things that we probably do today, and maybe also contributed largely to our academic excellence to be where we are today. So as you discuss, do not feel like you have not achieved something. You have achieved a lot. And this achievement can only be taken up to the next level. As we look forward to the International Women's Day tomorrow, let us forge forward to bringing more people on board so that the hashtag inspire and inclusion can make sense in our lives and in our society. As we come to the discussions on the table, remember at the end of the day, we are all influential in one way or another. We touch a life every day in the things we do and in the things we speak. I probably speak the way I speak because I remember when I was going to a boarding school, the mother tongue superiority was 100%. At least now it is not 100%. Because Sister Teresa in secondary school Form 1 made us read a paragraph every Wednesday without fail. And you would repeat until you read it the way she was read. There is a power in seeing the other person succeed. And in many ways, you have watched us succeed from where you sit and from the things that you do. So we remain grateful. May this conference be a reminder. May this conference be a solace. May this conference be a foundation that we can repeatedly come here every year or every 2 years and look back and start with a celebration because we have achieved something. We may not be where we want to be, but some level of achievement has been done. Let us discuss freely, let us share widely, let us share honestly, because it is from that honest discussion that we'll be able to set at the table for more women and family good. For the men in the house, we appreciate you for supporting us. Because in one way or another, you have played a role in making it possible for women to stand here and tell you their story. So thank you for giving us room to tell us and to tell you our story. Our stories may be told in many words, but in those very many words, you'll find our story. Thank you very much, and it is now my honor and privilege to declare this conference open. May God guide us, may it be a source of joy, and those who came, may you find value in having come for this conversation.
Thank you, Mrs. Margaret Mhoro, for your gentle and inspiring words and for declaring this conference open. Our third opening remarks would come from Reverend Agbonyame Arabato, SJ, Dean, Jesus School of Theology, Santa Clara University, Berkeley, USA, and former president of JCAM. This would be a recorded video.
The 17th century Congolese religious leader, Donna Beatrice Kempaveta, is recognized in history as an early resistor to European colonization and the abhorrent practice of slavery. She was a champion of racial equality and the founder of a spiritual movement baptized as Anthonianism by historians of Christianity. Donna Beatrice was a mystic, a visionary, and Nganga Marinda, that is a spirit medium. Although Beatrice of Congo, as she is sometimes called, has largely been ignored in history, this international conference on African women theologians offers a fitting occasion to resurrect her name in order to honor and celebrate the long legacy of African women who have been the icons of the origin, development, and progress of theology in Africa and in the world church. Donna Beatrice was an early champion of enculturation. She was possessed of and driven by the singular conviction that Christianity had to become fully African to reveal the pearls contained in the good news of Jesus Christ. Her idea of black Christianity or black religion was revolutionary. The idea that Jesus Christ, the saints, and the central figures of Christianity could be cast in African cultural, religious, and moral categories was repulsive to the European colonizers and missionaries who considered Donna Beatrice a threat. And when in 1706 she was summarily executed, her life and teaching had sown the seed that would lie dormant for more than 3 centuries. Today, we take for granted that enculturation was the fruit of Vatican II. I would contend that from an African perspective, it has a longer and deeper root. Roots that are traceable to the revolutionary courage, the prophetic wisdom, and the visionary leadership of African women theologians like Donna Beatrice Kempaveta. Her story also illustrates the pivotal and oftentimes unrequited leadership role that many African women have played in the development of theology in Africa. In the history of theological scholarship in Africa, there is no shortage of women icons, exemplars, and champions. Devoid of contention and acrimony, neither seeking fame nor vanity, these women's work invites us to a banquet of respectful dialogue, rooted in inclusivity, mutuality, and shared purpose. I have been privileged to work with and learn from some of the greatest and finest African women theologians. From the life of Donna Beatrice and some of these African women theologians, I want to underscore 3 principal lessons that these women teach us about the vocation of a theologian and the methodology of theologizing. Lessons that I believe are fitting for this auspicious occasion. Lesson 1. As I mentioned, Donna Beatrice imagined and conceived a unique version of African Christian religion. Her theology was at the same time liberationist, revolutionary, and culturally contextualized. Now, in the context of the brutal European invasion, colonization, and dehumanization of the African spirit, body, mind, and soul, Donna Beatrice's approach to religion sought to discover the redeeming presence of God in the African consciousness. A presence that not only preceded all missionary endeavors, but also revealed the gift of African religion as a dignified and respectable interlocutor. This model of a culturally contextualized theology is what we find in the theological scholarship of the late Anne Nasimiyu-Wasike, Rosemary Edith, and Teresia Hinga. The approach of these women and their colleagues echoes strongly the insight of Pope Francis in his motu proprio, Ad Theologiam Promovendam, that, and I quote, "Theological reflection is therefore called to a turning point to a paradigm shift, to a courageous cultural revolution, which commits itself, first of all, to being a fundamentally contextual theology, capable to read and interpret the gospel in the conditions in which women and men find themselves and live daily in different geographical, social, and cultural environments, and having as an archetype the incarnation of the eternal Logos, his entry into culture, into the vision of the world, into religious traditions of people. Donna Beatrice knew this. It was this same vision that infused her life, her thought, and her work of political and social and cultural and moral restoration of the Kingdom of Congo. Lesson 2. Donna Beatrice did not travel her theological journey alone. She was deeply conscious of the plight and power of the local community that she was galvanizing, empowering, and conscientizing. She was an early practitioner of theology as a communal experience, not one that is perched on a pedestal of abstraction, but one that is deeply embedded in the lived reality of the community of faith and fully conscious of what Pope Francis calls, quote, the conditions in which women and men live daily, end of quote. In our day and age, African theology has been privileged to witness the emergence of the circle of concerned African women theologians. The circle is quite rightly considered the brainchild of Mama Mercy Amba Oduyoye, who, in my mind, is the matriarch of African theology. One of the goals of the circle that Oduyoye founded was to reverse the invisibility of African women in ecclesial leadership, theological scholarship, and the academic study of religion, and to empower African women to contribute their critical thinking and analysis to the study of theology, religion, and culture. For over 3 decades, the circle has weathered multiple challenges and recorded phenomenal successes. Successes in promoting theological scholarship, nurturing new scholars, and mentoring leaders across faiths and across denominations. As I say it, one of the greatest achievements of the circle of concerned African women theologians is its methodology. As was the case with Donna Beatrice, the idea of circle denotes a desire to create an inclusive, open-ended, and participatory space for dialogue, conversation, and critical inquiry. Doing theology as a circle and in a circle is anything but a reified, elitist, and isolationist enterprise. More importantly, the theological vision of the circle is the empowerment of women and their communities. In line with this vision, theological scholarship addresses structural causes of gender injustice and explores transformative ways of honoring the dignity of women and men and promoting human and ecological flourishing. Donna Beatrice did theology for and with a purpose. Her fiery passion, uncommon intellect, and prolific theological and religious imagination served a purpose. And the purpose was to denounce unjust structures, liberate the oppressed, and lift up the dignity of the human person. And in doing this, she set the canon, the bar for theological scholarship from a distinctively African woman's perspective, which generations of African women theologians have endeavored to advance. Lesson 3. Whether in the life of Donna Beatrice or in the work of the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians, multiple African women theologians, by their work, we notice the vital significance of agency and voice. For far too long, both in theological scholarship authored by men and in official ecclesiastical documents produced by the church, a familiar common denominator has been the tendency to speak about women as an issue or a problem to be solved. If there is anything that I learned from my participation in the ongoing synod on synodality, it was the realization that women are perfectly, confidently, and competently capable of articulating their desires, their vision, and goals with audacity and clarity. It goes without saying. Church documents are littered with glowing and stirring rhetoric about the invaluable contribution of women to the church. The usual epithets would not be new to this audience, even though they are hardly matched by reality. It is an undisputed fact that across Africa, women are clearly the majority in the church. However, it is also true, anecdotally, but also factually, that they do not take an active role in decision-making processes and are denied access to a variety of ministerial spaces. When you look at the document for the continental stage of the synod, this is the same challenge that is underlined, and I quote a text from there which says, "Women remain the majority of those who attend liturgy and participate in activities. Men are a minority, yet, most decision-making and governance roles are held by men." End of quote. When it comes to all kinds of church activities, the participation of African women is heroic and phenomenal. Their fidelity and commitment to church activities are edifying, but that does not mean that they necessarily exercise influence or that their voices are taken into consideration in equal measure. As a result, we have an anomalous situation where the preponderant demographic that is committed to the church plays only a minimal role when it comes to shaping the direction, the decisions, and the orientations of this church. How is that fair? My point, and this is my point, I am a firm believer in the principle of non-impersonation. It is vitally important that we do not impersonate the voices of women on all matters and in all fields of theological scholarship in church and in society. From Donna Beatrice to so many African women present in this audience, wherever they are perfectly capable of speaking for themselves. Donna Beatrice spoke and stood for herself. We do well to listen respectfully to African women theologians. I congratulate Hekima University College on its 40th anniversary and for Hekima's commitment to amplify the voices of African women in theological discourses and to prompt the well-deserved respectful listening of African women theologians by the church and society. My hope for this conference is that it will be a humble experience of listening to the deep wisdom, creative insights, and prophetic witnessing of African women theologians, daughters of Donna Beatrice Kempavita, teachers of synodality, and the backbone of the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Raphael, for that stirring and concerned opening remarks. We'll see. Speaking of participation at the ongoing synod on synodality, what follows would be a synodal testimony from Sister Professor Beatrice Paye. She is a Senegalese and nun of the Congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception of Castres. She is particularly interested in advancing women in the African context. She was one of the delegates at the recently concluded session on the Synod on Synodality. Her testimony titled, "My Synodal Assembly Experience, an Unforgettable Spiritual Journey," will be presented by Mrs. Nicole Asher, who did her first and second cycle of theology here at Ekima University College and is now a member of the faculty in the Department of Systematic Theology.
Thank you. I will read in French. Mon expérience de l'Assemblée synodale, un voyage spirituel inoubliable, de Sœur Béatrice Paye. Chers participants, chères participantes, bonjour. Merci de votre invitation à prendre part à ce colloque. En tant que membre d'église locale, les représentants et représentantes de vos différentes conférences épiscopales, structures régionales ou continentales, vous ont certainement partagé leur expérience de la première session du synode. Certains et certaines d'entre vous ont célébré un ou plusieurs synodes aussi importants que celui que nous vivons actuellement. Je voudrais vous partager la mienne, non pas en tant que membre délégué avec droit de vote, mais dans l'entre-deux, à la fois dedans et dehors, car avec les autres experts et expertes et facilitateurs, facilitatrices au nombre de 62, nous étions au service du secrétariat du synode tout en suivant les congrégations générales et le moment fort de l'Assemblée, notamment les célébrations et autres manifestations, si le temps nous le permettait. Mon partage sera axé sur 4 points. Le premier point nous situera avant la première session de l'Assemblée. Il s'agit de quelques moments importants vécus au niveau continental. Le second point nous mènera à Frascati, où a eu lieu notre camp d'entraînement synodal pour la préparation de l'étape continentale. Le troisième point portera sur l'Assemblée synodale proprement dite, avec son style propre, son cheminement et ses 81 recommandations. Nous allons faire une petite immersion dans la salle synodale. Le quatrième point sera intitulé « En arrivant ici ». Il me permettra de vous présenter les jalons de l'école de synodalité, une autre manière d'être Église que nous avons initiée depuis décembre 2023. 1. Moment important au niveau local et continental. Le niveau local me situe entre 2 pays, Sénégal par mes origines et Burkina Faso, mon pays de mission, jusqu'il y a un peu plus de 3 mois. Le niveau continental, avec le groupe Initiative africaine de synodalité, IAS, piloté depuis Nairobi par le père Orobator S.J. Nous nous sommes retrouvés, laïcs, prêtres, religieux, religieuses et jeunes, en présentiel ou par Zoom. Cela m'a davantage ouvert vers l'Afrique de l'Est et son processus synodal très riche et divers. Avec l'Institut œcuménique et théologique Al-Muhafaka à Rabat, c'est-à-dire au Maroc, j'ai eu l'occasion de vivre ce qu'est la porosité d'une église marquée par la question migratoire, l'œcuménisme et le dialogue interreligieux très sensible en Afrique du Nord. Une autre expérience importante pour moi se situe au niveau des médias. C'est à travers des articles, des interviews et des rencontres par Zoom meeting ou webinaire que j'ai pu suivre le processus de quelques pays d'Europe, d'Amérique latine, d'Amérique du Nord et d'Australie. De ces expériences, je retiens la diversité d'approches de la démarche synodale dans les pays, les diocèses, les paroisses et les continents. Pour les uns, la mise en route a été lente, alors que pour d'autres, l'adhésion a été rapide. Cela est lié à plusieurs facteurs d'ordre géographique, culturel, besoins pastoraux spécifiques ou leadership ecclésial. En effet, les différentes régions du monde ont leurs propres traditions, cultures et défis pastoraux. Par conséquent, les processus synodaux peuvent varier en fonction de ces contextes locaux, permettant ainsi une adaptation aux besoins spécifiques des fidèles dans chaque région. De plus, les réalités pastorales varient d'une région à l'autre en raison des facteurs tels des défis socio-économiques, des questions théologiques émergentes, etc. Les processus synodaux peuvent donc être adaptés pour répondre à ces besoins pastoraux spécifiques. Enfin, la manière dont les évêques, les prêtres et les fidèles laïcs exercent leur leadership et leur participation au sein de l'Église influence également la diversité des processus synodaux. Certains diocèses peuvent accorder une plus grande importance à la consultation des fidèles laïcs, tandis que d'autres peuvent mettre l'accent sur le leadership épiscopal. Ce que j'ai ressenti, ce sont les échanges libres et engagés, vécus dans la prière, l'écoute réciproque et le discernement spirituel. Au cœur des grands défis qui interpellent fortement le monde et nos pays africains en particulier, la joie du parcours mené ensemble dans la diversité socio-culturelle est l'un des fruits de cette démarche synodale. Il y a une forte interpellation face aux personnes marginalisées, notamment les femmes, les jeunes, les enfants, les pauvres, les déplacés, ceux qui sont en situation irrégulière tels que, je cite, polygamie, mariage mixte ou avec disparité de culte, divorce, divorcés, remariés, union libre, apostat, etc. Ce que le pape François a lancé est un processus qui est à la fois ancien et nouveau. Il s'agit de retrouver l'esprit de l'Église primitive et une nouvelle réception de Vatican II, notamment au numéro 12 et 35. Le Concile Vatican II a été en effet comme une graine semée dans le champ du monde et de l'Église. La vie quotidienne des croyants, l'expérience des églises dans chaque peuple et chaque culture, les nombreux témoignages de sainteté, la réflexion des théologiens ont été le terreau dans lequel il a germé et grandi. Le synode 2021-2024 continue à puiser dans l'énergie de cette semence et à développer son potentiel. Le chemin du synode met en effet en œuvre ce que le Concile a enseigné sur l'Église comme mystère et peuple de Dieu, appelé à la sainteté. Lumen Gentium 12, 35. Il valorise la contribution de tous les baptisés dans la diversité de leur vocation à une meilleure compréhension et pratique de l'Évangile. En ce sens, La synodalité constitue un véritable acte de réception ultérieure du concile, prolongeant son inspiration et relançant sa force prophétique pour le monde d'aujourd'hui. C'est un tremplin vers une nouvelle façon d'être l'Église. Elle doit donc être injectée dans tous les coins et recoins de la vie ecclésiale. 2. Camp d'entraînement synodal à Frascati. Frascati est une maison de retraite à une quarantaine de kilomètres de Rome. Durant 10 jours, nous avons prié, lu, examiné et échangé autour de tous les rapports des conférences épiscopales, des congrégations religieuses, des dicastères romains, du synode virtuel, des rapports particuliers, etc. Ensemble, nous nous sommes mis à l'écoute des uns et des autres, ensemble à l'écoute de l'Esprit Saint comme au cénacle avec Marie. De la lecture des rapports, nous y avons senti un grand amour et une grande passion pour l'Église à tous les niveaux, mais aussi certaines polarités qui interpellent fortement l'Église. Dès lors, comment y trouver notre unité sans nous éloigner du chemin de la vérité et de la justice? Ce qui ressort de nos échanges, c'est que le processus synodal est tourné vers l'avenir et non vers le passé. Il ne s'agit pas de recréer l'Église du passé, mais plutôt d'un retour aux racines de notre tradition de foi, à la voix du Christ, aux Écritures saintes et au magistère de l'Église. Comment les mettre en dialogue avec nos réalités actuelles? 3. L'Assemblée synodale, mon expérience de l'Assemblée synodale, un voyage spirituel inoubliable. Le style synodal change la dynamique. Voilà pourquoi entrer dans une expérience de synodalité nécessite la conversation dans l'esprit qui se traduit par la prière, l'écoute réflexive, le silence. Tout cela permet d'identifier les convergences, les divergences, les tensions et les questions qui ont besoin d'être approfondies. En tant que participant à l'Assemblée synodale, j'ai été immergée dans une expérience profonde et enrichissante où la foi, la communion et la réflexion ont été les piliers de chaque moment. Durant ces jours de rencontre, j'ai été témoin de la diversité et de la richesse de notre communauté ecclésiale et j'ai été inspirée par la passion et l'engagement de chacun envers notre foi commune. L'atmosphère de prière et de discernement qui régnait dans chaque session a créé un espace où les voix de chacun étaient entendues et respectées. Nous avons partagé nos expériences, nos préoccupations et nos espoirs dans un esprit de fraternité et de solidarité. Les moments de prière et de célébration liturgique ont renforcé notre lien avec Dieu et les uns avec les autres. Nous rappelons l'importance de la communion dans notre cheminement de foi. Les thèmes abordés lors des discussions et des débats ont été variés et stimulants, allant des défis pastoraux aux questions sociales contemporaines. Chaque contribution a apporté une nouvelle perspective, élargissant notre compréhension des enjeux auxquels notre Église est confrontée aujourd'hui. Ensemble, nous avons cherché des réponses créatives et éclairées, guidées par l'Esprit Saint et la sagesse de notre tradition. Au-delà des délibérations, l'Assemblée synodale a été une occasion de tisser des liens et de cultiver des amitiés avec des frères et sœurs venant de divers horizons. Ces rencontres informelles ont enrichi notre expérience et ont renforcé notre engagement envers la mission de l'Église dans le monde. En résumé, l'Assemblée synodale a été pour moi bien plus qu'une réunion ecclésiastique ordinaire. C'était un voyage spirituel profondément significatif où j'ai senti la présence vivante de l'Esprit Saint parmi nous. Cette expérience restera gravée dans ma mémoire et continuera à nourrir ma foi et mon engagement envers le peuple de Dieu. 4. En arrivant ici, école de synodalité, une autre manière d'être Église. C'est un espace d'échange et d'écoute mutuelle à tous les niveaux de la vie ecclésiale, non seulement cette année, mais dans l'avenir. Tout le peuple de Dieu est invité à participer à ce voyage. L'inspiration et les initiatives que l'Esprit fait naître dans l'Église émergent naturellement de l'ensemble du peuple de Dieu, en communion avec les responsables pastoraux et les conférences épiscopales. La voie synodale devrait devenir le mode de vie de l'Église qui implique tout le peuple de Dieu dans l'écoute et la prise en compte de la parole de Dieu en s'écoutant les uns les autres. Comme l'a écrit le grand-père africain, l'évêque Cyprien de Carthage, je ne pense pas que je doive donner mon opinion de manière isolée. Je dois connaître les détails de ces cas et étudier soigneusement la solution, non seulement avec mes collègues, mais avec tout le monde. Il est important de tout penser et de tout peser avant de prendre une décision qui constituera un précédent pour l'avenir. Même si la synodalité reste encore obscure pour un grand nombre de fidèles, elle est définie par le rapport de synthèse comme la marche des chrétiens avec le Christ et vers le royaume. Elle implique de rechercher le consensus comme expression de la présence du Christ dans l'esprit. Voilà pourquoi l'Église ne cesse d'encourager les initiatives qui permettent un discernement partagé sur des questions doctrinales, pastorales et éthiques controversées à la lumière de la parole de Dieu, de l'enseignement de l'Église, de la réflexion théologique, en tirant profit de l'expérience synodale. Ce chemin nécessite la réflexion approfondie d'experts, de compétences et d'horizons divers, dans un cadre institutionnel qui préserve la confidentialité des débats et encourage la franchise des échanges, en donnant également la parole, le cas échéant, aux personnes directement concernées par des questions controversées. Conclusion. Ce processus d'écoute m'a donné l'occasion de contempler réellement l'action de l'Esprit présent dans la diversité des églises locales. Je rends grâce pour les fruits déjà reçus et portés au cours des étapes diocésaines, nationales et continentales. Je suis plus profondément consciente du défi que représente le fait de marcher dans la diversité et de se laisser conduire par l'Esprit. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes appelés à devenir davantage une église de l'écoute, de la rencontre et du dialogue, afin de rayonner la communion et être de plus en plus un signe et un instrument de l'unité de toute l'humanité. C'est ce que nous avons vécu lors de la veillée de prière œcuménique, Together, du 30 septembre 2023.
Very big thank you to Mrs. Cole for that presentation. So we'll have another summary of the testimony by this time. Sister Dr. Mary Wambua Nizi Lani. Welcome.
Good evening once again. I read an English version. My experience of the Synodal Assembly, an unforgettable spiritual journey. Dear participants, the representatives of your various Episcopal Conference, regional and continental structures have certainly shared with you their experience of the first session of the Synod. I would like to share mine with you, not as a delegated member with voting rights, but in the middle, that is, one of the invited experts and facilitators at the service of the Synod Secretariat. My sharing will focus on 4 points. 1, important moments at the local and continental levels. My local context places me between 2 countries, Senegal and Burkina Faso. At the continental level, the African Initiative of Synodality Group, led from Nairobi by Father Orobato, SJ, gave me a platform to engage with the lay people, priests, religious and young people. Working with the IAI Mo'ofanga Ecumenical and Theological Institute in Rabat, Morocco, accorded me the opportunity to experience the porosity of a church marked by migration issues, ecumenism, and interreligious dialogue problems. The media was also helpful in providing information on the synodal process in some countries in Europe, Latin America, North America, and Australia. A fact remains evident in all these experiences: the diversity of approaches to the synodal process, marked by factors bordering on geographical, cultural, and pastoral needs, ecclesial leadership, socio-economic challenges, and also emerging theological questions. Nevertheless, despite the diversity, free and engaged exchanges in prayer, mutual listening, and spiritual discernment seem a cut across experience, as well as a concern for the marginalized, particularly women, young people, children, the poor, the displaced, and those irregular marriage situations. Suddenly, it became evident that what Pope Francis started was a process that was both old and new, a rediscovering of the spirit of the primitive church and a new perception of Vatican II. The synodal path values the contribution of all baptized in the diversity of their vocations to a better understanding of practice of the gospel. Hence, the Synod on Synodality constitutes a true reception of the Council. It is a stepping stone towards a new way of being church. It must be injected into every nook and cranny of ecclesial life. Point 2. Frascati is a retirement home about 40 kilometers from Rome. For 10 days we prayed, read, examined, discussed all the reports from the Episcopal Conference, religious congregations, Roman dicasteries, and special reports. Together, we listened to each other, listened to the Holy Spirit, as in the upper room with Mary from reading the reports, we felt a great love and passion to the church at all levels. However, certain polarities strongly challenged the church. What emerges from our discussions is that the synodal process is focused on the future and not the past. It is not a question of recreating the church of the past, but rather a return to the roots of our faith tradition, the way of Christ, the Holy Scriptures, and the magisterium. Point 3. My experience of the Synodal Assembly, an unforgettable spiritual journey. Entering into an experience of synodality requires conversation in the spirit, which results in prayer, reflection, listening, and silence. All of these helps identify convergences, divergences, tensions, and questions that need to be explored in depth. Faith, communion, and reflection were the pillars of every moment. During these days of meeting, I witnessed the diversity and richness of our ecclesial community, and I was inspired by the passion and commitment of each person to our common faith. These dispositions created a space where everyone's voices, concerns, and hopes were heard and respected in a spirit of fraternity and solidarity. Moments of prayer and liturgical celebration strengthened our connection with God and each other, reminding us of the importance of communion in our faith journey. Reflecting on the pastoral challenges and contemporary social issues facing our church today, we sought creative and enlightened answers, guided by the Holy Spirit and the wisdom of our tradition. Point 4. Upon arriving here, School of Synodality, another way of being church. Lessons learned from the synodal process include: 1. The synod is a space for exchange and mutual listening at all levels of ecclesial life, and all of God's people are invited to participate in this journey. 2, the inspiration and initiative that the Spirit gives birth to in the church emerge naturally from the people of God in communion with pastoral letters and episcopal conferences. 3, the synodal way should become the church's way of life, inviting all the people of God to listen and consider the word of God and to listen to one another. Thus, the church encourages initiatives that allow shared discernment on controversial doctrines, pastoral and ethical questions in the light of the word of God, teachings of the church, and theological reflections. Conclusion. The process allowed me to truly contemplate the action of the Spirit present in the diversity of local churches. I am deeply aware of the challenges of working together in diversity and being led by the Spirit. Yet, we are called to become more of a listening and dialogue church, to attain communion and become a sign of unity to all humanity. Sister Beatrice Boyer, CIC. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Dr. Mizmali, for that summary. And thanks to Mrs. Fashola Spain. Above all, our thanks goes to Sister Professor Faye for drawing us into your experience on listening, communion, and change. We shall have 2 keynote speeches. The first will be from Reverend Professor Stephen Mbagwa, the Vice Chancellor of, pardon my pronunciation, of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, and our Vice Chancellor too, as a constituent University College. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. The chair of the Board of Trustees, the chair of the University College Council, the management of the Kema University College, the faculty, the distinguished guests who are coming to address this particular conference on the women's voices in theology and the empowerment, and all the protocol observed. Good evening. I am very excited to talk to you today on the theme of women, on the memorial of Saints Felicity and Perpetua. These are women, isn't it? Yes. I think with that I can sit down. Because it tells us so much about the role of the women. We don't have to look far. We just need to look in our breviaries, in our orders, in our math books, and we find them almost every other day. There's a woman saint, isn't it? So we are very, very excited about it. That means that women have been at the table, because somebody says that if you are not at the table, you might be on the menu. So I think for many decades, women have been on the menu. But now we are very happy that they are at the table and they are sharing, they are talking, they are being listened, and they have talking sense, and they can be held responsible for what they say, because it is valid, truthful, and honest. I would like to say that even in my particular time, that we thank God for Hekima University College, and congratulations on 40 years of service to the church, humanity. we are proud of you and we wish you well. It's important to know that Kwea or Catholic University and Hekima are twins. We were born the same year, 1984, and we also planning on our journey from July this year. And therefore, we were started at the same time for the same purpose, started humbly as also chair, which was the Catholic Higher Institute of Eastern Africa that was teaching theology. And therefore, we are celebrating today and tomorrow together as a family. I would like to talk about the theme of the women's theologians and their voice in the church. It's very important to state from my own experience. My mother was my first theologian. This is what happened. I was ordained and I was put in a very huge parish that was about 70 kilometers from my home. And we had 31 outstations. And I was working with the Congolese missionaries. And once in a while, after months, I would go home. And this particular day, the last outstation was 20 kilometers towards my home. So I did not need to go back to the parish. So I carried my bag and everything and told the priest after that, I will go home. And in the last outstation, somebody gave me one cabbage and a bunch of carrots. And could I drive 20 kilometers to drop them in the parish? No. And I knew in my place, whenever I went home, I grew up in a farm. I carried as much milk as I wanted to take to the parish. I carried a lot of vegetables, a lot of pears and carrots and anything and potatoes, because I come from Moro, where the chair of the council studied. That is my village. And we are happy that we produced you. My sisters also went to the same school. Yeah, and therefore, what happened is that I went home, I took out my bag, and I came out with just a bunch of carrots and a small cabbage. It was so small than the ones grown in my home. And I took them and I told Mom, you can cook this. I was given in the church, but I had so because there is no point of them staying in the car for 4 days because I had a few days off. They would have gone back. And my mother told me anything given to the church must be consumed in the church. Take them back to the car. Finally, she allowed me to put them in the refrigerator until when I go home. You know, I told her I will carry about 20 kilos of carrots because we had so much. These are just small. So, but I learned very hard, in a hard way, that what belongs to the church stays in the church. I thought we would begin. So that is my mother, the first theologian. I was not taught such a detail in the seminary. Therefore, I would start by saying that we are slowly observing that the African continent is emerging as the center of Christianity. In 2023, the world Catholic population was 1.37 billion, with Africa accounting for about 1/6 of the population, with 256 million Catholics. Recent popes have also used the concept of patron principle and the Marian principle to describe the important role women and men together play in the Catholic Church. But a biblical scholar writing in the Vatican newspaper said, it is time to talk about the discriminatory and the stereotypical notions behind it. While it was conceived as a good concept, but others thought that it would be negative. And therefore, we have to, because the evolution of such a thought has continued to emerge and to influence the thinking and the action. Such intimations have also pointed to the rising of the need for women to take more active roles in the leadership of the church. Pope Francis has appointed a number of women, religious, and lay in various dicasteries in Rome. Among them are Sister Raffaella Petrini, the Secretary General of the Government of the Vatican City State, Sister Yvonne Rongoth, FMA, former Superior General of the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians, and Dr. Maria Leah Zovino, President of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations. I also wish to say that in the International Federation of Catholic Universities, the president is a woman. Woman of all the Catholic universities in the world. I happen to be the vice president. So you can see that I've given way to be the vice of a woman, because I recognize the equality in the sharing at table, so that nobody becomes an enemy to other. Last year, I was invited to a university in Texas, USA, to give a talk on the gender parity, especially related to the fourth and fifth SDGs. And what I found when I was carrying out my research is that countries where there is gender equity in education and the level of learning, those countries are doing extremely well. Most of Africa is either in yellow or in red because of the gender parity. And therefore, if you go to Europe, to America, to the very, very well and developed countries, you find that the parity in some of the countries, women are more educated than men in those countries. At the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, we have over 8,500 students, and among them, I have more women than men. So I think we're on the right trajectory, isn't it? And therefore, we do not need to go far even in Africa, because based on this education and the women empowerment and their dedication, like we have today in the celebration of Saint Felicity and Saint Perpetual, we see women also emerging in leadership. All is not lost. Women are chairs of the parish councils. Women are in the diocesan tribunals. Women are in various positions of leadership that we never had 10 or 15 years ago. And therefore, there is a glimmer of hope that someday that we are going to be where we want to be. One of the things that has contributed to this particular lessening of the gap between the genders is the pedagogy, the way theology is now taught, the way sciences are taught, because they are not so taught to discriminate, but they are taught to bring people together. And that is the same thing that I need to tell you, women as theologians, that we should not teach, study theology, carry out research, which is going to be in the artifacts of history. We need to have a theology that transforms the individual person, the world, and the societies in Africa and beyond. I always stand very bewildered when I look at the immigration to the north, the sons and daughters of women trying to cross the Pacific and the Red Sea into the north. Why is it? It is because of governance and leadership in Africa. Not that we don't have resources to do that. And I hope that the women's theology will be able to take up this matter so that maybe where women, the men, not women, the men has failed, the women should come with their theology that is connected in the values and the virtues of good governance, the virtues of good resource sharing, and also justice and peace, because there is also a lot of shedding of blood in our continent, not counting anywhere. Yesterday we had the principal on Weza, because we also going on at the Catholic University with a theological session, and each one put the dates without knowing what the other had. And he was our chief speaker, our chief guest to open and to give the keynote speech during that. And such matters have come. I see a lot of women, even we have some women from the US who are going to present, and from all over Africa. And I'm so delighted that even in our theology and in our canon law, women are teaching in our university in those particular two, the electorate and also the faculty of law. And this is telling us it's time we wake up to the reality of this equity. The recent scenarios, therefore, as we have said, justify women to continue taking the role of being teachers of faith. Thus, become theologians is now a natural path which many the women have taken and have become prominent in the universities. Theologicals and the other institutions, the seminaries, and all other places that demand specialized skills in theology and canon law and in religious studies. And I am very proud to even hear some of you teaching the seminaries in the universities and are actively involved even in the synod. The foundation of women's equal and distinct opportunity in the Bible is very significant. We have Eve, the mother of all, Sarah, our mother in faith, Anna, the mother of Samuel, Abigail, the wise wife who saved her husband from the wrath of David, the mother of 7 sons in the book of Maccabees that encouraged her 7 sons to martyrdom, Anna, the grandmother of Jesus, who I celebrate fondly on the 26th of July together with the Joachim. We have also Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, Veronica, who wiped the face of Jesus, courageous women, and today's feasts of the Perpetual and Felicity, who even shed their blood for our faith. How far do we need to go beyond here? How far do we need to go beyond such personalities to say that women should be in their place? They should be at the table with everybody else. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is well seen as a reflective woman on the word of God. Before her yes to the angel Gabriel, she shows her reflection on the matter and asks for clarification. At the presentation of the child Jesus in the temple, as Anna and Simeon recounted on what was about Jesus, Mary pondered all these names in her heart. This is a reality of theological reflection that seeks deeper the revelation of God in the human history. And therefore, Mary, the saints, and all these personalities have stood firm in the history of our salvation as reflecting on the Word of God, on the revelation, and what humanity ought to define its relationship with God. You are here as women theologians to stand in the long lineage of women in salvation history who have taken a trajectory of participation and decision-making in the life of the church and the world. We have it in the ongoing synod. You are there and you are at the table and contributing to and making decisions about the future of the church. Congratulations. We are proud of your courage, of your intelligence, and becoming scientists in the study of God and the church. We are now in the age of inclusivity. Anybody who thinks different is just in a historical artifact. We need also have the same inclusivity in information and other roles that the church gives to us. And therefore, I call on you to start stimulating the issues of theology and participation at your houses of formation. Let's not just teach the charisms. Let us also teach the current church issues in order to stimulate those young ones to come up and join your voices in making the decisions of the world where we must go in our faith, liturgically, in all the sacramental celebrations in the church. I also call you to entrench this dynamism among women at the onset of the academic life. To men at all times and to the church, you must also be present as teachers of faith and witnesses of our Lord Jesus Christ. This will as well also stimulate the opening of new horizons and change of worldview from the older stereotypes about the place and the role of women in the world of faith, in the world of work, and in the family. I say we need to remove the old lenses that used to look at the world differently. We must wear the lens that sees the world in a similar and identical manner, be either a woman or a man, because we share the same issues. Towards this, as I come to the conclusion, I don't want to bore you too much. I would say that on this, I have also been thinking, I am not a theologian myself, but I studied theology in the seminary, but theology to reach the level of myself, me, I took other disciplines. But I have been thinking about this issue in the last 2 years, about creating an African center of excellence in theology and canon law, because we do not have a voice we have had a very little contribution in the current synod. Very little. You hear whatever the Pope says, our theologians standing up and talking about that issue of the blessings. We have not been heard, isn't it? We should have been there maybe to clarify it for our bishops. And therefore, we do not have solidarity that can be listened. And as Father Unuweza said yesterday, in Nairobi alone, we have so many institutions of theology in where I have almost 50 theologians and over 100 people taking their licentiate and their doctorates. But but we do not have a common denominator in the voices of the church. So we need to do that. And for that, last year I met with some donors, and I have talked to them, and they have agreed to sponsor about 40 scholarships, and more than a third will be for women. We have the postdoctoral research in theology and canon law, and almost a half of them we want to give to the women. So we want also to start publishing and having internationally recognized journals. And I wish to say that I do not want to work alone, and I have asked Father John Unaweza to be my vice chair in the board that will be deciding over 900,000 euros that I have received for this research. And therefore, I am extremely happy knowing that we started this 40 years to make a difference. And I know that some of you will become, we have appointed one member of who is here.
The incoming deputy principal academic affairs.
Yeah, we have also, we have included her in the board, and also people from the Francophone and the Anglophone speaking Africa, so that we may form a formidable solidarity, because we are the majority now per capita in the vocations, and therefore we should have a voice on the direction of the church. And I am grateful to the donors who gave us the 900,000 euros for this research that I applied for. And I want to be a participatory issue for both men and women, so that finally we can have a center of excellence for Africa and with Africans, and also interacting with the global scholars. So I'm glad that some of these global scholars are here. We are going to involve you. I want Father Onyweza to give their names so that they could mentor these postdocs. They could also mentor the students who will be taking their doctorates in various theological and canon law disciplines. So I am extremely excited. I'm extremely happy that God is opening the way for such a great endeavors and for such a wonderful conference that you are here. I know we are the minority, but we shall be together. Finally, I just say that tomorrow I'll not be there. We have the national meeting of all the vice chancellors and deputy vice chancellors in Naivasha, and I am presenting a paper there because I'm also the chair of the private universities in Kenya. We are over 30 universities, so as the chair, I am going to address this national forum on the needs of education reforms in various aspects, because we are going to do the same in our country. So I ask for pardon, because, but I know I will read the proceedings. I've been assured that will be done. And therefore, thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Professor Stephen Mbagwa, for your keynote speech and for highlighting not just the importance, but the fact that parity between men and women in education and governance is the only way forward for humankind. Our second keynote speech will come from Dr. Yohadi Mushombo, She is a consecrated woman and a member of the Theresian Association. She is an assistant professor of theological ethics at the Jesuit School of Theology of Santa Clara University. Her research focuses on political theology, emphasizing the global South and women's political participation, among others. Her recently published book titled A Christian and African Ethics of Women's Political Participation, Living as Risen Beings, was published in 2023. She will join us online.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I cannot make myself visible because it says the host is to allow me to be visible. So the hosts need to, okay, now I can start my video. Thank you. So thank you very much. I would like to start saying that African women theologians and African women theologies have started the synodal process for a very long time. So the church and actually Pope Francis is only catching up on them. And I will start by saying Pope Francis to the message to the Catholic News Agency last year in August, he says this, I quote, "Precisely at this time, when there is much talk and little listening, and when the sense of the common good is in danger of weakening, the Church as a whole has embarked on a journey to rediscover the word together." And Marcel has asked me to talk about African women theologies, and this is what I make as a point, that African women theologies have been, embarking on this listening together for a very long time. And they started since 1989, when they gathered for the first time for the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians since 1989. And this conference took place in Accra, when the women gathers and try to bring together the voices, not only the voices of women, but the voices of the continent. And the circle is also expecting, so the 1989 conference gathered 70 women. And this year, the circle is meeting again and is expecting more than 100 women in Ghana. And this is a synodal process in March that women have been embarking with. So now to turn to African women theologies. These theologies is plural because they refer to a vast continent and use different context and method. African women theologies are an essential part of African political and liberation theology. They address colonial and post-colonial issues and the societal dynamic that undermine the flourishing of women within the context of specific socio-religious traditions and cultures. African women theologians share a premise that what undermines women does harm to the nation state. One essential common feature of African women theologies is the search to unmask the root of oppression and the powerlessness of African women. As Isabel Firi put it, I quote, African women theologies are a critical academic study of the causes of women's oppression, particularly a struggle against societal, cultural, and religious patriarchy. They are committed to eradicating all forms of oppression against women through a critique of the social and religious dimensions, both in African culture and in Christianity. Isabelle Firry suggests that oppression of African women takes root in patriarchy, colonialism, neocolonialism, racism, capitalism, globalization, and sexism. And Merci Amba Udoyaye follow her and saying, among these root causes, patriarchization and other oppressive culture are a severe disease that need to be addressed. That the need for a culture hermeneutic to further a liberating theology of enculturation. So, and in this way, I will present African women theologies in a few points. I will start with this cultural hermeneutic toward the liberation theology of enculturation as they embrace it. And then I will say a few words on the genderless concept of God, which is one of the other aspects that African women theologies focus on. And then I will say a few words on African women biblical hermeneutic, African women political theologies, and I will conclude with African women Christological thought. Starting with the hermeneutic toward the liberation theology of enculturation. African women have identified culture as a tool often used to further domination. A standard premise of African women theologies is that Christian churches suffer from a cultural alienation that need to be addressed to allow the flow of men and women communication with God. And Merci Amba Udoyaye advocated this very strongly. In addition, African women theologians and feminist theologians claim that some oppressive culture and practices have been long overlooked in Christian theology. Consequently, these oppressions are also ignored in African Christian theology, and they are really filling up the gap. African women theologies are an applied and contextual theology, not satisfied with the mere announcing or denouncing of injustice of the African setting. And to understand African women theology, we need to consider the specific African settings and the contextual African settings. So African women theologians agree that these settings are marked by the historical event of slavery, colonization, and patriarchy that still affect the continent and the women to date. Second, the African scene is shaped by a Christianity that was historically associated with colonizer, as Orobator mentioned, bringing up Kimpavita, and in many ways failed to affirm African culture and religion as means by which the encounter with Jesus Christ could be met and fully lived. Besides, this association was characterized by imperialism and paternalism, and it still has its impact on Christianity in modern Africa. Third, African women theologians also agree with the fact that African women historical figures play a grounding role for African women theologies. And these figures provide ground for theologizing. They mark the encounter of missionaries and European colonizers and the African people's conversion to Christianity. And among these figures, you have Kimpavita that Orobator already expanded on. So these figures are pioneers of enculturation theology. And Beatrice Kimpavita of the Congo was the pioneer of what can be called decolonizing and enculturation theology today that African women really ground on. So the Circle of Concerned African Women Theologians, also known as the Circle, build upon Kimpavita's legacy and African enculturation theology. In addition, the Circle includes women from different Christian denominations and other religions such as Islam. Through the Circle, religious views and cultural dimensions of the life of African women are represented. African women theologians are concerned with African women's problems and the ways religion, including African religion, Christian religion, and Islam, and cultures, including African independent churches, affect their lives and participation in church and society. One of the tasks that the Circle has been taking is rewriting the stories of women, the story of the women at the grassroots level. Its theological agenda aims to uncover African women moral agency and their contribution to liberation, enhancing, flourishing, and liberating Christianity. African women theologies share the same concern with feminist theologians globally as they struggle to make sense of Christianity and call on the consideration of oppression of women while putting emphasis on praxis and action. But the emphasis on African women is more strongly put on the grassroots, as I just said. Yet this attention to grassroots action of women is really considered as a locus theologicus in African women theology. And it suggests that African women scholars can not only engage in a dialogical approach with other scholars, considering the continent's challenges, they also need to engage communities and situate the scholarship in the community for social transformation. And that is what makes the big difference between African women in general and African feminists. So the criticism that African women, and that this is the kind of criticism that usually come from the African continent, that they are just copying the Western world, as you can see, this cannot be the case, right? Because they ground their theology even from Kimpavita before the Second Vatican Council. The contribution of African women theologians can be grouped in three main points reflecting their theological claim: African women post-colonial biblical hermeneutic, African women political theology, and African women Christology, where African women are asking one main question: which Christ for African women? Or who is Christ for African women, considering the reality of African women on the continent, in church and society? These claims are assessed through a shared cultural hermeneutic for a liberating theology of enculturation. Cultural hermeneutic are how African women theologies bring women experience into their theological concern. African women theologians speak cultural and social languages, not just academic ones. The hermeneutic culture affirms that cultures have been tainted by colonialism. For this reason, a critique of the colonial culture as its impact on women's lives is necessary. And this is a task that African women theologians take. Furthermore, this critique enables African women theologians to appreciate and evaluate the resilient element of the indigenous African culture. As Musimbi Kanyoro argues, culture is a double-edged sword. In some instances, culture is like the creed for the community identity. And we all know how this can be dangerous for people's lives. In other instances, culture is the main justification for the oppression and injustice. End of quote by Musimbi Kanyoro. African women theologians uncover the empowering and disempowering cultural visions and practices of African and Christian tradition. So they also uncover the empowering feature of Christian tradition. That African women theology seek to retrieve a liberating culture from Christian and African tradition perspective. And among the liberating culture that African women really uncover, we have all the stories and the theological component that we can dig upon Kim Pavita and many other historical figures, very long time before the Second Vatican Council. Through cultural hermeneutic, African women theologies further elaborate the context of religion and culture, showing how they intermingle. Merciamba Udoyaye suggests that this elaboration constitutes, I quote, the main arena of women's research and writing, end of quote. She characterizes African women theologies as bearing, I quote again, the marks of creating a people whose human dignity and rights are trampled over, end of quote. Retrieving a genderless concept of God, denouncing the colonial, imperial, and patriarchal patterns with which the Bible is shaped, and responding to the question of which model of Christ speaks the most to African women experience. And this I turn to the genderless concept of God in African women theologies. African women theologies demonstrate the ways Christianity negatively influenced the genderless feature for God affirmed in African traditional religion. And I focus here on two main elements. First, the suppression of God's female imageries and symbols and the local divine powers. So this suppression was performed by the association of Western Christianity with colonial and patriarchal power. Second, the existence of priests really on women priests who presided at sacred rites. So there is a need for a theology that embraces God as mother, they say, to complement God as a father for African women theologians. They suggest that African culture and religion is resourceful for this theology, is resourceful for this genderless conception of God. African tradition and culture have a genderless conception of God. African women theologians argue that the gender of God becomes an issue when it is used as a patriarchal tool to dampen the spirit and the sisterhood, or to draw boundaries around women participation in the church ministry. So the pioneering work here is that of Merciamba Udoyaye, who claim, I quote, using male language to talk about God has made God male, and as a result, excluded women from the humanity, end of quote. So by suppressing the genderless concept of God, which is very African traditional, and local divine powers, which are also very African, Western Christianity and the colonial and patriarchal power also suppress African women leadership in society in many ways. Besides, African men androcentrism and patriarchy are reinforced by this kind of Christianity. So African women theologies show the extent to which calling God Father or using the masculine pronoun for God and even focusing on a Christomonism, right? Or just a maleness or Christ-centered, even if as if Christ was not for everybody, right? So a maleness Christ-centered focus teaching of the Christian churches, this has negatively impacted women's role and leadership in church and society. Udoyaye uses some Nigerian culture, such as the Akan and the Yoruba, who convey a gender-free language. So this is not copying Western feminist theologian at all. Udoyaye go back to the Akan and Yoruba tradition. For example, in Akan and Yoruba, God does not have a gender. God is a male-female one. She shows how female divinities are often wives and mothers in Yoruba representation. But then she turns to Ghana, arguing that there are male and female deities in Ghana, right? Tradition, which are also associated with natural phenomena and who do not have male and female functions. So besides, gender plays little, very little, and often no part in who becomes an adherent of a particular deity. That African women theologies uncover these religious, cultural resources that are more neutral and inclusive, even regarding the gender of God. Arabome also reinforced this idea of the imagery of God in African traditional religion, drawing in African traditional religion, as it challenges patriarchal structure and practices imposed by Christianity. So the conception of God as mother or father in African traditional religion accentuates the positive qualities of fatherhood and motherhood. Arabome explained, I quote, "The African woman praises God who is neither male nor female, but God who is life, God who is presence, and God who is mystery." End of quote. Also, some culture like the Zimbabwean had a genderless divinity called Mwari, who was referred to neither as male nor female, and who could speak through women, through men, and even through objects and through the natural world. So for African women theologians, texts on the gender of God need to be interrogated, deconstructed, and reinterpreted. So Udoyaye, in turn, shows how African women ancestors participated in every sphere of life. Right? So still, African women internalize a partial Christian view that has guided women as helpers or subordinate. So even the marginalization of African tradition has been sacralized by many biblical interpretation and many Christian theologians. For African women, biblical scholars, there is a need to retrieve, right, this gender inclusive conception of God and to retrieve women leadership role from scripture. For this purpose, a decolonizing hermeneutic to reading the Bible is necessary. And to this, I turn to the African women biblical hermeneutic. African women biblical hermeneutics seek to deconstruct any harmful understanding of scripture regarding women that contradict Jesus' message. This deconstruction uses suspicion, right, liberation, hope, and healing glances. It seeks to respond to reading the Bible to help meet human flourishing, not only women flourishing, but human flourishing on the continent. Nada suggests that biblical narrative on women need to be retold through women experiences to expose, interrogate, deconstruct, and reinterpret text incoherent with Jesus' vision of love and liberation. So in applying this critical post-colonial hermeneutic to reading the Bible, Musa Dube shows how a specific use of text can become annihilating to women and be supported by the African tradition themselves. To illustrate, she uses the example of the Pauline women's submission to the husband appear as one of the common ground for both African tradition and scripture that became annihilating to women. So Dube suggests uncovering two realities in biblical texts. So the reality of imperialism, that which justify the oppressive patriarchal norms. For Dube, I quote, women in the colonized spaces not only suffer the yoke of colonial oppression, but also endure the burden of two patriarchal systems imposed on them. So she uses biblical narrative and proposes a more liberating interpretation for post-colonial African countries, which challenge colonization, colonialism, racism, capitalism, and cultural chauvinism. So drawing on the fall in the book of Genesis, for example, the text affirming that Eve was formed out of man ribs, Paul's call to the submission of women to husband, and on the fathers of the church who affirm the view of women as the weaker sex, helpers, and causes of sin, right? African women theologians assess the impact of these texts on African women. And for this, they argue that women are consequently taken as inferior beings by nature compared to men. So all these texts do have an impact. So the teaching need to change, just the way we approach the Bible. And Teresa Okure shows that these readings are based on a misreading of the Genesis account. So like many other feminist biblical scholars worldwide, right, African women biblical scholars take up the task of deconstructing this misreading, showing the solid sociocultural Jewish patriarchal drive beyond them and the way they can affect women, and especially in Africa. African women identity, the cultural elements that are life-affirming for women in Africa, whether they are validated by traditional Christian teaching or not.
It's 9 o'clock.
So they use narrative stories, drawing from the African oral tradition, putting them side by side with the stories of women in the Bible. For Udoyaye, the retelling of stories was a traditional source of theology, but they seem to have been superseded by an analytical and deductive approach. Storytelling is another approach that African women theologians take. So they later brought the stories back into the academia, affirming their theological relevance. Another contribution of African women theologians is the hermeneutic of scripture and culture to reread the legacy of resistance of African women historical figure, and they do so to reread many stories of historical figure. Dube Udoyaye and Teresa Okure interpret the legacy of resistance using what they have been calling Talita Kum hermeneutic. African women, Talita Kum hermeneutic, are ways to call on women to live and rise, even where she confronts oppressive powers that crush her at her very being. As Dube content, I quote, Talita Kum hermeneutic refers to the art of living in the resurrection space, the art of continually rising against the power of death, the power of patriarchy, the powers of colonial oppression and exploitation, the powers producing and perpetuating poverty, disease, and all forms of exclusion and dehumanization. It is a call to live as rising being. This is a pressing call in African women biblical approach and political theology. And one example for this is also Jose Ngalula, who has argued against protecting cultural biases into biblical and magisterial texts. This she calls religious illiteracy. This is Jose Ngalula concept. And she defined it as a patriarchal reading and naive interpretation of biblical texts that become harmful to women. Right? So Ngalula recalls that our Christian roots are inclusive, and she hopes that this synodal process will help us to go back to these roots that are very synodal. And to this, I will turn to a few words on African women political theology. African women post-colonial political theology overall claim that to decolonize African mind, political governance need to consider African values that favor democratic processes. So, and these include respect for the sacredness of life of everyone, and the African communal anthropology that promotes equal distribution of good and solidarity, paying attention to new form of politics that foster people agency to address the challenges faced by the communities. African women themselves have internalized oppressive colonial patterns that make the colonizing mind more difficult. And this is what Engel van Venk has called anthropological poverty. So they tend to comply with the community's norm for the sake of the good of the same community, right? Even when they are harmful. So this internalization deepens the low self-esteem in the church and society. So they become accomplices in suppressing and disvaluing their participation. So this women tendency makes the decolonizing task very difficult in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa. However, the decolonizing task is to be taken up not only by women themselves, but also by the church as the body of Christ. And this is one aspect that women are expecting the synodal church to embrace as well. African women political theology maintain that what hurts women in church and society hurt the entire body of Christ. Yet for Udoyaye, I quote, the Christian churches have not encouraged or even accommodated women who have raised their voices in protest. End of quote. African women theologians agree that women's being and all the factors that doubly impoverish them seem not to be the church's concern, at least not to be the church first concern. They remind that the church must take her task of empowering women to speak for themselves. The church must provide women space to access theological studies rather than obstruct their voice. And for this, the synodal processes are very welcome. Udoyaye continues that the mothering ability of women gears them toward attention to life in general. They should be allowed to manage the community to whom they naturally give countlessly and within the church. She added that the approach of African women is not a reactionary one, to those of men. They are not just reacting. They are not just trying to have power for the sake of power. Instead, it's that which strive for good, as they already do, right? As our mother do, our mother taught us, right? And they are still doing. So this striving drive the becoming subject and agent in matters that affected the lives and the community. And Udoyoye suggests again that it is only when the church will open the path to women to become agent in decision-making affecting the church that the church, I quote, will become a home for both women and men, end of quote. A church that consistently and constantly overlook women's voices and the pastoral implication of the gospel on their lives and theology will be less likely to become an authentic voice of salvation. And I quote Udoyoye again, whatever is keeping subordination of women alive in the church cannot be of the Spirit of God, end of quote. Nor can it be of Christ, whose teaching and attitude have only been liberating to women. And to conclude, I will say a few words on African women Christological thought. Considering that all Christologies are contextual, African women theologians engage a Christological question that Jean-Marc Ella tried to respond to in his African Cry. Who is Jesus for the people who encounter him? This is Jean-Marc Ella. Is the encounter with Jesus bringing about liberation and healing, or pain and tears? How does the encounter with Jesus truly become good news? Jean-Marc Ella. Besides, African women theologians address several Christological questions. So beside this question raised by Jean-Marc Ella, they add these ones. What do African women say about Christ? Right? Who is Christ for African women? Whether there is such a thing as women Christology, or whether a formal statement of Christology take into account women experiences of life. Although this conference will not exhaust all these ideas, right? And I'm not going to respond to this question in this paper. So I will include only a few insights shared in African women theologies, starting with Udoyoye and Amoa on the traditional Christological claim that Jesus is the Lord. They argue that this message affirms the fact that the Christ hoped for by the Christian communities is the one whose lordship is expressed, I quote, in terms of a benevolent ruler, a ruler that conveyed love. A Christ who sacrificed himself to end human suffering and bring human beings into a new beginning, in an eschatological one about the kingdom to come. And this new beginning will come on the end of the age. So African women theologies include the African charismatic and dependent churches in the approach to the lordship of Christ. And these churches respond to future eschatology of the end of the age and the lordship of Christ by offering a Christus Victor message, but a Christus Victor message today against evil that affect women and affect the continent. The churches see Christ as the healer, as the center of Christology, the one who heals the wound of women and turns the death of daily life into life. Christ heals now and today, not only at the end of age. He comes to comfort the people today. This consolation takes both the material and the spiritual dimensions. The many women involved in these churches embrace a Christ who affects their whole life. Nothing at all is outside the business of this Christ. So African women theologians also engage in dialogue with the Christology suggested by John Mbiti, who claims that in African religious activities and belief, I quote John Mbiti, no line is drawn between the spiritual and the physical. That African Christology affirms that Christ stands for spiritual physical welfare. The people need a Christ victor Christology because they face so much evil of any sort. The evil that denies them the sacredness of the humanity and abundant life. Women, African theologians, affirm this salvific Christological function of the cross established by a male theologian and go beyond what Christ means for the realities of their lives, of their daily lives. The African woman Christ is indeed the one who saves from the forces of death and gives a widow her child back when she is oppressed by any cultural norms that silence her and bend her over. It is the Christ that transcends and transforms culture and has liberated her to do the same. So Christ for African women then becomes the liberator, the companion, the friend, the teacher, and true child supporting her mother, as Christ was child of Mary. Because as for the sacredness of all men and women, that of womanhood is also affirmed by Christ. For both Margaret Wanjiru and Anne Nasimiyu, the Christ for African women, I quote, is the anointed one who liberates from all oppression, the companion, the friend, the teacher, and the caring, compassionate nurturer of all, end of quote. In conclusion, African women political theology affirm that feminist liberation theology is not the panacea of Western Christianity, as some theologians tend to argue. It has roots in all culture and histories, as the story of Kim Pavita illustrates for the African settings. Uduyaye and Kanyoro, in The Will to Arise, draw essentially on historical African women agency to articulate the liberationist theologies. Before 1989, African women theologies were centered on retrieving the stories of the moral agency of women in history to confront the Christian message of liberation with the experiences of abuses and relegation of women at a lower level in church and society. Today, African women theologies continue to face a dualistic anthropology when it comes to the views of women in cultural and socio-religious settings. In response to the Christian dualistic and the tendency, African women theologians bring up what Teresa Hinga has called, and I quote, theoetical challenges of gender binaries and disdain for the body, end of quote. And Teresa Hinga brings this in the scholarly theological debate. In this perspective of standing against such gender binaries and distance of the body, African women theologians continually affirmed a call to rise, the need for healing and equal consideration of what endangers women's bodies and souls. They call all theologians and the church to coherent responses to allow men and women empowering and liberating communication with God. And this is a task in which they engage in synodal processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bikadi Mushomo, for this erudite presentation. And as our principal would note, drawn from the rich heritage of Africa. On a personal note, I've been teaching biblical hermeneutics here, inclusive of feminist and post-colonial. And as I hope to introduce Africa biblical hermeneutics next academic year, I would remember to highlight the African women biblical hermeneutics and the Tali Takum hermeneutical approach. Thank you very much. At this juncture, I will invite Sister Dr. Jacinta Obondo, Chairperson of the Steering Committee, to give us final orientation.
Very Reverend Professor Stephen Gruber, Mrs. Margaret Mboro, Reverend Dr. Marcel Ineza, all protocol observed in the interest of time, coupled with the fact that some of us had a long journey. Good evening. Good evening. We are disposed to make your stay here comfortable and conducive. And because of that, I'm going to give a number of announcements that will help us to be comfortable within this space that we are going to be here. First, presentations are timed, as already communicated to you in the correspondences that we had. And so the timekeepers will be notifying you when your time is almost over. Please kindly respect that notification when you receive it. Second, we have accommodation available at Rosa Mystica. Therefore, those of us who arrived in the evening and do not have accommodation and need one, please see me after this, as we'll be moving to the next part of this opening ceremony. Third, conference venue. The first 2 days, conference shall be held here in the postgraduate campus. The third day sessions will be at the undergraduate campus. The bus will be available to take us to the undergraduate campus on that day, and the ushers will direct you where the auditorium is and other places that we will be required to be in on that day. In the afternoon, we will be back here for the closing ceremony. transport. Each day in the morning, the bus will pick those who are residing at Rosa Mystica to this place and back. Please be at the parking on time. In the morning, the bus will leave the parking at 8 a.m. In the afternoon, it will leave the parking at 3:30 p.m. In the afternoon, immediately after lunch, the bus will take those who need to rest back to Rosa Mystica and bring them back at 3:30. Please make sure that immediately after lunch, you are at the parking outside here of the. But you are free to take a walk if you like to do exercise. It's not very far for those who wish to have some exercise. After each day's activity, at 6:45 p.m., the bus will be available at the parking to take us back to Rosa Mystica. Meals. Health break, teas, and lunch will be served here, except for the last day, in which case it will be served at the undergraduate campus. The ushers will guide you to the dining room. Breakfast and dinners will be served at Rosa Mystica, except today we are going to have it here, and the last day we shall have it here. For any technical issues with your electronic gadgets, please contact our ICT department on the second floor. They'll be available to assist you. For any health issue, Sister Mary Nzilani is available for assistance. There she is. But we also have a medical doctor in the compound in case of need. On the last day, that is Sunday, we will have an excursion immediately after lunch. It is optional. So please sign your name at the registration desk if you wish to go for that excursion as from tomorrow. You heard about Hekima Review. Some of you will be approached to join Hekima Review Board. Please, I appeal, if you are approached, respond positively. Those who need translation from English to French or any other language is also available. Just make your need known. I've been informed that there are some of us who needed Hekima Review copies and did not get them. We shall make arrangements so that you get them. Don't give up. A reminder to those who have not submitted their PowerPoint, please do so. There are about 7 presenters who have not submitted their PowerPoint. Kindly do so. Finally, may the steering committee please remain behind as we move to the second session of this opening ceremony. Thank you.
You will all agree that the beginning
of this conference has been very stimulating. The richness of the presentations, the different perspectives the presentations have taken, the diversity of the presenters. This is the richness of women in theology. To this end, allow me to thank each one of you for the active participation. Importantly, allow me to mention today's presenters, Dr. Deogracias Rezaura for the opening prayer, the welcoming remark from our principal, Dr. Marcel Uineza, the JCAM President, Jose Minaku, our chair, the chair of the council, Mrs. Margaret Muhoro, the Dean of Santa Clara, Reverend Dr. Agbon Kiamege Roberto, Sister Beatrice Faye, whose speech has been read by Mrs. Nicole Fache, Dr. Leokadi Lushobo, and lastly, the chair of the steering committee, who is running up and down to ensure that this conference is a success. So I'd like to thank each one of you, and I wish you a good night. Enjoy yourself.
Just one communication. We have the washrooms in each and every floor. They are always at the far end. Your information. And finally, may I request Professor Goga to grace the meal so that from here it goes straight to you.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. We thank you, mighty God, for the session that we have had in opening. We pray that you continue to be with all the participants, grant them health of mind and body. Grant us a quiet and restful night ahead of us. And now we ask the Lord to bless us and bless our food as we say, bless us, O Lord. This good gifts which are ours to receive from your house through Christ our Lord. And may the Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you.